South Africa has the highest level of joblessness in the world, and there is no believable program and plan to create jobs for our people. More than 10 million South Africans who are capable of working and are willing to work cannot find jobs anywhere. And these are black people who are systematically excluded from meaningful economic participation under colonialism and apartheid. When political apartheid ended in 1994, our people had hoped that majority black government will use their capacity of the state to develop productive forces, redistribute wealth, and create quality, sustainable jobs for all. When faced with the question of the white poverty problem and crisis, the apartheid government used the state and government to create opportunities for their own people and almost completely eradicated joblessness and poverty amongst white people. Today, they say government can't create jobs, it must be a private sector. But we know that during apartheid, they established state-owned institutions with an aim and a purpose of employing white people, particularly the illiterate Afrikaners. The post-1994 government has served to entrench this colonial and apartheid reality of making white people richer and black people poorer. The poverty and the joblessness of black people is getting worse under the current administration, with more than 1.7 million people who were previously employed losing jobs, and majority, if not all of these jobs, were lost in the private sector, which we are told it can create jobs. Despite this basic and verifiable reality and statistic, a president of a former liberation movement comes here to say that government does not create jobs and the hopeless people of our people must wait for private sector to create jobs for them. Sending our people to the private sector for jobs is like sending a cattle for slaughter. What we know about the private capitalist sector is that its purpose has never been and will never be about creation of jobs. The purpose of a capitalist industry to exist is not for jobs purposes. The purpose and sole purpose of capitalism and the private sector is to make profit. That is why private companies always adopt new technologies that seeks to replace workers with machines. That is why the private companies always force government to weaken labor protection laws, because they want to super exploit workers and pay them low and no wages without consequences. That is why private companies always prefer to employ undocumented immigrants, because they force them to work for longer hours and pay them almost nothing. That is why private companies are willing to destroy the environment, dirty our rivers, and pollute the environment as long as they can make profit. That is why private companies use private armies, security companies, and even police to shoot and kill workers who demand higher wages. Workers who were demanding higher wages in Marikana were killed by the ANC government, and the sole purpose was to protect private companies' right to maximize on profit. That is why all major capitalist corporations, particularly in the mining sector, are involved in tax avoidance and illicit financial flows, because they want to shift their profits to countries with low or no taxes at all. There is no private capitalist corporation that has as its primary objective the purpose of creating jobs. They are all obsessed with profits at the expense of our people. Despite all this, a president comes here to say our people must go to the private sector for jobs. What is evident is all these things is that the former liberation movement has now officially admitted to what we said when we launched the EFF in 2013, that the former liberation movement is incapable of and will not transform political power into economic power. Kwame Nkrumah was always correct that political power without economic power is meaningless. The former liberation movement has admitted that it will not use its political power to develop the productive forces and create jobs for our people. It is also historically and very incorrect to suggest that the sole role of government and the state is to create conditions for the private sector to create jobs. The history of capitalism, whether private or state capitalism, whether in the West or East, has demonstrated that the state always plays a direct role in the creation and protection of jobs. Let us perhaps give practical examples. China is the fastest growing economy in the world. South Africa and Africa's biggest trading partner has a significant state-owned sector of the economy that led to economic expansion, built infrastructure, and created millions of jobs. The Grid Corporation of China, established in 2002, is a state-owned and employs more than 1.5 million people. China National Petroleum Corporation is a state-owned and employs close to 500,000 people. Emirates Airline, which is state-owned, employs more than 100,000 people. So these are many other examples that we can always give where the state plays a significant role and create jobs. State Bank of India, which is owned by the government of India, employs almost 250,000 people. So the story that government cannot create jobs is neither here nor there. There are many other examples we can give you that demonstrate that the most rapid development of the productive forces happens under the state leadership and guidance. We are giving the real examples of these countries in BRICS bloc because these are important strategic partners to South Africa and the entire African continent historically, now and in the future. You never said anything about BRICS, actually never gave any noteworthy analysis of the global balance of forces as if South Africa exists in isolation. We've never had a president of a country who conclude a speech without giving an analysis of the globe and the politics thereof. What we want to caution you, though, in that none of the countries in the G7, the colonial and imperialist forces you find comfort with are genuine friends of South Africa and African continent. We define South Africa and the entire African continent to these Western imperialist countries, particularly in the G7, as neo-colonialism. These countries have for centuries pillaged and raped the African continent and robbed us of our resources, and any person who believes that there can ever be a developmental relationship between Africa and the West is either a fool or something else.